Homeschooling is hard. Homeschooling a neurodivergent kid is a whole nother level. Hi, I'm Katie, and I have 6 kids that I homeschool, many of which who are neurodivergent. This definitely has stretched me. There are times that it has broken me. And the practical experience of homeschooling a special needs child has definitely taught me more than any book ever did. So today I want to share 5 of the lessons that I have learned homeschooling special needs kids or neurodivergent learners, and hopefully help you in this process as well. The first lesson I learned is that every child's pacing is sacred. It's unique and it needs to be protected. There were so many times that I panicked because my child wasn't reading yet, or maybe because they couldn't finish their math without tears. Or maybe it was that they had to get through a whole bunch of physical therapies and occupational therapies and speech therapies just to function, that we were having trouble getting to the academics. I used to think that we were constantly falling behind. But over time, I learned that fast progress is not really my goal. Genuine growth, seeing real growth in my child, is actually what I cared most about. And when I started to focus more on that genuine growth and making sure they really had a firm grasp on what I was teaching them and stopped looking around and focused on their pacing, things started to go a lot smoother. There is something so beautiful about seeing a child who struggles with a concept and having that light bulb moment where the light bulb turns on and you see it finally clicks. It might be months or years later even, but that is something that is worth fighting for, and not dragging your child along in the process just because you're trying to hit certain criteria or mile markers, whether that's academically, physically, emotionally, mentally, or more. The second lesson I learned is sometimes environment trumps curriculum. Especially for our neurodivergent learners, I spent a lot of time trying to find the right curriculum for them, or questioning why a curriculum wasn't working when we were having more meltdowns, when we were having those light bulb moments. What I quickly discovered for many of my neurodivergent kids is that actually the learning environment that they were in mattered more than the curriculum that I chose. So for instance, for my ADHD learners, if the house was very noisy and chaotic, they were in a spot maybe at the table where they can see what's going on in the dining room, the kitchen, and the living room all at once, they were overstimulated and would tend to not focus and not do as well in school. So we were able to selectively place their seating to make sure that they were sitting in a place with less distractions, maybe even using noise canceling headphones to help them be able to focus. Sometimes this requires having softer lighting, maybe having some classical music in the background, or making sure there's no music in the back. It can be doing things like getting rid of physical clutter. When I first started, I had my homeschool room covered in posters and fancy fun things, but I realized quickly that overwhelmed a lot of my kids. And thinking through environmental factors like your child's texture issues, if they have trouble with tags in their clothes or with jeans, don't have them to school in those things. Yes, I do push some of my neurodivergent kids to try new things and to do things that are even sometimes uncomfortable, but I'm not going to do that in an environment where I want them to also learn and take in new information. That is its own teaching opportunity in a different time and season. When you start to pay attention to environment and you start to make sure your child can hear you clearly and see you well and those things, you'll notice that there's less sabotage happening in your homeschool, and you can adapt almost any curriculum to fit their needs if their learning environment is optimal for them. Lesson 3, and this is a hard one, is grieving the fantasy of the homeschool you wish you had and embracing the children that God has given you, which frankly is the real beauty in the situation. It actually is so much better than my fantasy ever could be, but I definitely had a fantasy as a homeschool mom of being able to take my kids to library story time and to be able to sit around and have those fun interactions. And instead, I had a son who had autism, who was a runner and would just take off across the room, or who was sensorily overwhelmed. I had kiddos that had medical needs or differences in learning abilities and couldn't stick with the information that was being presented. I had other times where I wanted to do these amazing activities, where I wanted to do co-ops or other activities, and they didn't have accommodations for my child, and I had to change those pictures in my head, and I had to accept the reality of what it is. I've learned to embrace the fact that we homeschool, but we're very rarely home because we're frankly spend a lot of our times in doctor's offices and waiting rooms and therapy appointments, and we've learned to embrace the on-the-go lifestyle. It's okay if your school days are full of a lot of redirection and dysregulation and trying to just finish one subject. There's still something to be learned in those moments. And it's okay to take a moment and grieve what you wish could have been, but don't sit there for long, because the truth is God didn't make a mistake when he gave you your specific kids. And he didn't make a mistake when he gave your kids to their siblings. I know I've also struggled with this reality as well, as I realize how sometimes my neurodivergent learners, my special needs learners, impact the learning of my neurotypical kids. I realize that God matched them up for a reason, and they have taught each other much. They have taught each other patience. They have learned kindness towards one another. They have learned empathy and sympathy in ways that they could have never been taught out of a textbook. And there is something beautiful about it. It does not mean that we have one sufferer, because of the needs of the other. It's not that at all. It's just going to look different than what the ideal was in your mind, and that's okay. Lesson number 4, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. I spent a lot of time thinking and planning our homeschool year for years for my special needs learners, for my neurodivergent learners. I would pick out the perfect curriculum and make the great schedules, and ultimately, a lot of times we wouldn't get to all of it. On good days, we would get to the curriculum, and on hard days, it would be hard to get to anything. And so we would oftentimes just not do school on those hard days. The problem is, if you have a neurodivergent learner, there's a possibility that you're gonna have more hard days than you are good days. So just not doing school on those hard days was not an option for me and my family. This is when we developed our ABC schedule. And if you wanna learn more about that, I do have a video you can check out down in the description below, walking you through kind of how we set up our days, but learning that maybe you're in curriculum on those best days. And maybe on those hard days, you're spending your time reading a book, watching a documentary, listening to podcasts, maybe using extra apps like IXL or other supplementary things to continue the learning, but knowing that maybe it's not going to look like your ideal day. Lesson number 5 is that we're not behind. We're on a totally different road. I think this is really hard because there is such thing as behind. I know a lot of people in homeschooling say there's no such thing as behind. You can neglect your child's education and they can suffer the consequences of that because of your decisions. So that is a very real thing that's out there. It's not as common as I think a lot of people think it is. It is more in those unfortunate situations where parents are not taking that responsibility and role as seriously. Most parents who are teaching their kids, there isn't a sense of behind because you're going at your child's pace. And that's what really is meant by that saying. The thing with your neurodivergent, with your special needs learners, is we're on a different road. So we need to see forward progress, but that forward progress might be very slow. There might be an academic level that some of my kids never get to because of other needs that they have. But my goal is to help them to do their absolute best, what they can actually do, to do their absolute best to their ability. And so I think it's helpful to start recognizing what your child's best is and to understand that that might vary. Not to compare your kids not only to other kids around you, but especially to their siblings or to family members that are close or friends that are close. It can be hard when they can see a child who was born just a day or two before your child that's getting their driver's license or doing these bigger things, and your child may or may not ever be able to do that. And that's okay. I think remembering that we are having forward motion is the goal. Remembering that ultimately we are called to be faithful in teaching our kids and training our kids, that character matters just as much, if not more, than the curriculum. And it's okay to continue working on and learning a concept, even if you're stuck at a lower grade level for a long period of time. We just want to be consistent and faithful. And when we're consistent and faithful, there is no such thing as behind. It is only when we are inconsistent and neglectful that we can have those behind moments. If no one's told you lately, you're doing better than you think you are. I promise it's gonna be okay. Just consistently show up for your kids and fighting for what they need. The work you're doing is important, Mama. Please let me know down in the comments what are some of the lessons you've learned by homeschooling your neurodivergent kids, and check out this whole playlist here of different videos that might help you when you're homeschooling a child with special needs.